Hey everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone's doing well. And this is a friendly reminder for you that hurricane season is not until November 30th. Obviously, we had two pretty big hurricanes that were out in the Atlantic. Didn't impact the US. There were some impacts for Bermuda, however. Although they've been reported to be relatively minor, flash flooding and high winds have been the main threat and also increased surf for Bermuda mainly. And outside of that, nothing to really talk about. If we were to go ahead and look at the satellite here and take a look at what's left of those two hurricanes, this is it right here. Now, at one point, we had one storm that was Category 5, that was Humberto, and then we also had a Category 2 in Imelda. These two actually merged in a dance called the Fujiwhara effect, which was actually really cool to see if you're a weather nerd and you're watching these storms on satellite. Even though they didn't make any impacts here towards the East Coast, it was still pretty cool to see. Eventually, Imelda actually had won out here, and this is the remnants of both of these storms put together here. What What's most interesting now is as we continue to watch this dissipate, you can still see that low-level spin of what once was. We aren't going to see any further impacts over towards any landmass. It's just going to just die out at sea at this point. But if we were to go back to where we were previously, what you would notice is that we have two areas of interest here. We have our first area that's actually closer to home here with a very low chance of development, but it's going to be one of those pesky systems we have to watch, mainly due to the fact that this is going to cause increased shower and thunderstorm activity and maybe sporadic stronger thunderstorms possible over here towards the Florida Peninsula. This is going to cause heavy rainfall, maybe some localized flooding, and maybe some increased wind gusts. In fact, interesting thing to make note of here, with that onshore flow that we have during this time of year, with the daytime heating and elevated surface temperatures in Florida, we've had a few thunderstorms and even one tornado report over towards the western half of the peninsula, which was really intriguing. But going beyond that point here, I wouldn't be too concerned about much of anything for this area as of right now. We'll have to watch because the ensemble models do have something kind of popping up here. Do I think it forms in anything significant? Probably not. I'm almost certain of it because we're too close to some sufficient land masses such as Florida, Cuba, and such. So for this to really start to take off, it would take a lot. Keep in mind, the sea surface temperatures towards these areas are relatively warm still, so anything's possible. You always have to remember that when you're looking at the tropics, especially when a lot of these areas like the Gulf and the Caribbean have been untapped. Then, of course, we shift our attention back towards the main development region, where we have our other area here. We don't have either one of these as invest right now, and I don't anticipate them developing into them all that quickly, at least in the short term. But this other area that we have here, our second disturbance, has a 50% chance of development within the next week or so. It is going to make its way towards the Leeward Islands, and we'll have to see what happens beyond that point. But more than likely, if this does really start to flourish anything, it's probably going to end up being turned out to sea. But this would likely become our next named storm. We'll have to see if that ends up being the case. But anything's really possible at this point, and you always have to remember we've had crazy severe weather systems that have happened in December, which is historically known for not being a big-time tornado month. And then we also have had a year like 1991 where we didn't have our first named storm all the way up until peak hurricane season. But we all remember what Andrew did, so this is why we continue to make these videos. Now, one thing that does kind of also put a wrinkle in everything and still kind of leaves me with a little bit of uncertainty is this fact right here. So what we're looking at here is the Enzo, and we've talked about this in our monthly outlook videos for lower 48 in general, not so much the tropics. But this does bear significance to it, and it's the fact that we are shifting into a very weak La Nina, but a La Nina nonetheless. And historically, La Nina tends to yield to more tropical activity more often than not. Now, I can't guarantee that that's going to be the case with this situation, but it is something we have to pay attention to due to the simple fact that the correlation is there. And again, hurricane season ends little less than 2 months now, so It's not over yet. And that's something that that's the point I'm always going to drive home here, all the way up until the end of hurricane season. So, if you're annoyed by it, I'm sorry, but got to state the facts here. So, we were to go back all the way to week 1 here. If we were to go ahead and look at our MJO here, this is the rainfall phase that we're looking for here. Watch what happens with this area that's over towards the eastern Pacific. This does indeed sneak into the Caribbean here and parts of the Gulf. Now, what's so significant about the MJO is pretty simple. Increases shower and thunderstorm activity. With any sort of frontal boundary low pressures that pop up here, they can take advantage of this environment and further flourish. Now, obviously, there are other environmental factors that go into this, and that's going to be the key emphasis behind tropical development, but this is one of the key factors to look for when it comes to model data. And this is a signal that remains relatively persistent throughout the next several weeks. So there is still some intrigue to be had here. Do I think that this becomes a significant situation? Again, I'm kind of leaning towards no, but until November 30th, I can't just look past it. You know what I'm saying? But in any case, let's go ahead and take a look at the other environmental factors that play into tropical development here. So we're going to actually pull up the GFS and the European ensembles and take a look at our model data here. So we're going to put both of these in motion. And I want you to pay attention to the main development region, but then shift your attention to the Gulf here as we continue to progress through the runs. So we're getting towards the end of the run. You can see that over towards the Caribbean, it looks a little bit quiet in regards to our upper level wind shear. And then as we get over towards the Gulf here, that's where things kind of get a little bit wacky in the long range here. Now, the thing to remember is as we get towards the back half of October, there is some anticipation for a change in the weather pattern. But those first couple weeks before, though, the trough does start to get zonal at a point. And it's from that point where I think we will have the best potential for any kind of development to occur over towards the Gulf maybe, or any sort of growth. And that's just looking at the GFS. The Euro is in pretty good agreement with this, especially towards the middle part of the month. We can start to see that wind shear begin to slowly but surely kind of back off towards the end of the model run here. The only reason I don't have higher confidence is because we're a little bit further out of range at this point. And obviously when you get 300 plus hours out, it's hard to be confident in much of anything because it can easily change by the next scan. So it's another trend to really look for at this juncture, but I'm not really going to speculate and say that this is exactly what's going to happen. This could all turn out to be nothing and just another video that you end up watching just because. And if you're watching just because, I appreciate you. But it's just a reminder, again, really more so that hurricane season does not expire does not end technically until November 30th. And with the La Nina in effect, I wouldn't take anything off the table just yet. We're close, but not quite. So another environmental factor, of course, is our moisture content. And like I said, we got some good moisture over here towards the Caribbean. It's really going to be the Gulf of Mexico that's going to be the wild card in all of this. You can see I cannot get my words out. Over towards the eastern Pacific, where we had good moisture over here, you could see storms starting to fire off over there. Environment's a little bit better over there versus over here towards the Gulf and the Caribbean. But you do see a couple of low pressure centers try to pop up. Now, obviously, those two disturbances that we've been looking at are the points of interest. I would completely write off whatever we were seeing here towards the end of this model run from the GFS. And if we actually look at the Euro, we don't see quite the same activity that we would be seeing over towards Florida like we were there. There is a little low that does pop up at the end of that model run, but we already talked about what happens 300 hours out. That stays in no man's land at this point in time right now. But again, we do need to be watchful as we go into the long range even then. So, trend watching at this point, nothing of major significance to be had there. we were to go ahead and take a look at our ensemble members here, these are where we're going to be highlighting potential for increased low pressure areas. We go ahead and loop both of these. What you'll see, of course, is this storm system, this disturbance sits off the West African coast, has a pretty good chance of forming into something. But again, there's that turnout to sea like we mentioned before. You can see the other areas over here not really doing a whole lot, but there are some signals to be had there as well. And then if we look on the Euro, it's pretty much the same old song and dance. You do see a little bit of increased activity over here. So I think the European does kind of favor that MGL setup a little bit more than maybe the GFS ensembles here. So again, kind of a wacky look here. Not a whole lot of confidence to really be had, but there are some features that do need to be watched very closely here. Any minute changes here could really make or break this forecast over the next couple of weeks. So still something worth watching at the very least. So lastly, what we're going to do is take a look at our blend of ensemble members. And this again highlights our area over towards the West Atlantic here, or Eastern Atlantic I should say. Shows our other little feature that pops up here. Quite a few ensemble lows pop up there as well, but really anything beyond that point within the 10-day period, not much that I can really latch onto as of now. So outside of our West African disturbance, nothing to immediately be concerned with. Just a not a quiet time frame, but one that's not going to be problematic, or I guess you could say less problematic time frame for the U.S. Statistically, we're still in business here when it comes to hurricane season. So that being said, appreciate you watching this video, whether you think hurricane season is dead or not. Appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're new around here especially, and I will see you with a new video very soon.